this afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Donald Levitt. I'm honored to serve as chairman of the Liberty County Board of Commissioners. I want to take this time to give you an update on where we are with our coronavirus handling or management, if you can manage it, in Liberty County. But we know as citizens you are anxiously awaiting to hear where we are, especially after the governor's new declaration came out. So we want to kind of bring up there on where we are and what our feelings are here in Liberty County. Thank you so much for your compliance, and we heard some reports earlier about our community. We're proud that you're doing very, very well. But the main statement we want to get out today, and you hear from some others, is that we not become complacent, that we remain vigilant, that we keep up the social distancing, that hand sanitizing, all those measures that were put in place that are CDC, state of Georgia, and locally recommended. So please, ma'am, please, sirs, let's adhere to that. We have been blessed thus far that our community has not been overly impacted, but of course having one case is an impact. So we want to help to maintain that. There are different theories out on whether or not we have peaked or not, so we're not sure at this time. So, but in the meantime, we want to do the things that we can do. So once again, we applaud you for your efforts. We ask you to continue those efforts that we might help to manage this condition as best as we can. Please feel free to call any of the references that you have. The Coastal Health Department put out a new phone number that you can find on their website for your call-ins, for those persons who have questions about the virus, about the ability to be tested. We ask you to don't forget the sheltering in is still very important. When you go out, be careful, wear your mask, do your social distancing, all those things we've been talking about. We just want to say keep that up. So once again, we appreciate you. At this time, we will hear from some others who are in the room with me who share in your best interests. So first we hear from the Mayor of Hinesville, the Honorable Alan Brown.
Thank you, Donald. And good afternoon now. We've gone just past 12 o'clock, so it's a good afternoon to Hinesville and Liberty County. We're here today to kind of bring you some updates as we've done for the last couple of 3 weeks. And to thank you again for what you've done in our community. Our citizens have done a wonderful job, and I may be more optimistic than others, but you know, I've seen some things that I've looked at that are a little bit positive, which makes me happy. So on Monday, though, Governor Kemp announced his intent and plan to reopen Georgia, which will allow a lot of businesses to reopen, provided that they meet and maintain certain requirements and restrictions. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. These requirements and restrictions, of which there are 20 right now, and I saw him on national television last night, and I think I can understand them when I read them, but I think he's going to clarify them even further today or tomorrow, prior to Friday. But it's important that our business owners understand what they are. And I know they're on websites, and before I sit down, I'm going to read the 20 of them to you. They're very short, so bear with me. I'm not going to do it right now. I'll do it before I sit down. As with previous iterations, the City of Hinesville will enforce and adhere to the governor's orders. We have no choice. So we have to understand those guidelines so that if we have a reason to check on a business, we'll know what we're checking on. We ask all our citizens to familiarize themselves with the contents of the order and educate themselves on what they actually say in relation to your own situation. While he has issued orders, there are a few things that have not changed with the governor's new executive order, and here's what is the same in general. Bars and nightclubs are to remain closed until the state deems it appropriate for them to open. The shelter-in-place order remains in effect until Thursday, April 30th, and the public health emergency remains in effect. I think it's been extended to May 22nd is now the date on it. Citizens of Hinesville are still expected to maintain good health and safety practices until the public health emergency is lifted. With this new order, the governor's team has seen fit to rescind some of the stricter economic measures put in place to prevent the spread of disease across the state. However, I'd like to remind citizens that does not mean that the all clear has been given. When I say practicing good health and safety measures, until this is over. I don't mean just staying 6 feet apart, wearing a mask, and washing your hands, although those are 3 wonderful things to do. I mean staying at home unless you have to go out for necessities or to work. If you must go out, please cover your face. If you must go out, please only have one member of your family running the errands. This is not the time for a family trip to the store just because the kids are bored or you need a break from the house. And we know we all do. No parties, cookouts, or picnics. We've had a slight number of those, not many, but they're not approved yet. And your social calendar will fill up soon enough. Just give it time, and please follow the rules now that we have in place. And we do ask the pastors of Hinesville and Liberty County to consider continuing virtual services for a bit longer. For years, we've all said the same thing over and over. A church is more than 4 walls and a roof. Well, we're learning more about that now. Let's come up with ways to protect our members as we protect our friends, neighbors, and families at the same time. While in-person services are not banned with this order, they are still not advisable, and especially if you cannot put the measures into practice. Our concerns are the same as everyone's: safety and well-being of our citizens. Tough decisions were not made lightly in those early weeks, and just because the decisions are being made at a higher level and coming down the pipeline does not make them easier to swallow or enforce. We know that. A lot of this basically is following the golden rule. What we don't want for our citizens is to forget or shirk the measures that are in place to protect them, falling back into our normal habits just for this situation to arise again down the road. So we ask Hinesville residents to continue to follow warnings and look out for themselves and their families and their neighbors, and we will continue to work through this until it is all over. I would like to quickly read those 20 requirements for businesses, just so people will hear it and they can refer back to this. You can find them on many sites, city, county, and I'm sure the state. The first measure is screening and evaluating workers who exhibit signs of illness such as fever over 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, cough, or shortness of breath. You got to be able to do that. Requiring workers who exhibit signs of illness to not report to work or to seek medical attention. So you're going to be business is going to be required to do that. Enhancing sanitation of the workplace as appropriate. I like all these general words as appropriate. Requiring hand washing or sanitation by workers at appropriate places within the business location. Providing personal protective equipment as available and appropriate to the function and location of the worker within the business location. Prohibiting gatherings of workers during working hours. Permitting workers to take breaks and meals outside in their office or personal workspace or in such areas where proper social distancing is attainable. Implementing teleworking for all possible workers. Implementing staggered shifts for all possible workers. Holding all meetings and conferences virtually whenever possible. Delivering intangible services remotely wherever possible. Discouraging workers from using other workers' phones, desks, offices, or other work tools and equipment. Prohibiting handshaking and other necessary person-to-person contact in the workplaces, unnecessary person-to-person contact in the workplace. Placing notices that encourage hand hygiene at the entrance of the workplace and in other workplace areas that are likely to be seen. Suspending the use of personal identification number pads, pen entry devices, electronic signature capturers, and any other credit card paraphernalia. Enforcing social distancing of non-cohabitary persons while present on such entities' leased or owned property. For retailers and service providers, providing for alternative points of sale outside the buildings, including outside pickup or delivery of products and or services if an alternative point of sale is permitted under Georgia law. Increasing physical space between workers and customers. Providing disinfectant and sanitation products for workers to clean their workplace, equipment and tools. And the last one is increasing physical space between workers' websites to at least 6 feet. I know it's kind of boring sounding, but I think we all, those of you who plan to open your business according to this order, need to familiarize yourself with those I probably have a copy in my business with me. And as it changes, we will try to tell you of any changes to them, or if it becomes more clear. As always, I encourage you to follow our publications on the website and social media accounts. And then in closing, I'd just like to read a little something. It's very short that I picked up today that says, "The truth of the matter is, we'll all do well to continue to keep our distance from others and be cautious and considerate in social situations, because no one, not the governor, not the mayor or county commission chairman, nor those who build the computer models, and certainly not those of us who are made restless by cabin fever, none of us knows this pandemic's true shelf life." Nobody knows that. So, be safe and use common sense. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Howard. I'm the city manager for the city of Hinesville, and I would like to just share with you from an operational perspective. The city of Hinesville continues to provide all services within each and every department. We have been virtually doing this in a manner that maintain the safety of all employees, and so we're excited about how we've approached this. And the mayor has gone through a list of requirements and guidelines that has been handed down by the CDC. I would like to just share with you for a moment of how we got to this point, because initially back in March of 21st of March, we were one of the first communities to take these mitigation efforts to protect our citizens in Hinesville and Liberty County as a whole. And I've heard some comments made in reference to, the numbers are not high. We're okay within the city of Hinesville, Liberty County as a whole. Why can't we go back doing things as usual, as normal? Well, because of those measures, because of those mitigation measures that we took, I think that has something to do with the numbers being where they are now. There are other factors, obviously, you have to consider within Liberty County or within the state of Georgia for that matter, and that is testing. There's not a tremendous amount of testing or sufficient testing being done at this point, so we don't really know where we are so far as those who are infected with this virus. And so we have to do what we need to do locally to maintain our safety, and that is to stay at home. Save lives, stay at home. And that is the phrase that you've heard many, many times. And we as a community, Liberty County, we have basically got this down to a science for the most part. And then there will be measures taken by the governor, and we'll consider and how to best approach that, and we'll address it accordingly, and we'll adjust, and we'll continue to manage it. And that's what we've been doing for the last month. And when numbers are handed down, when data is analyzed, that's not taken into consideration of who's your next neighbor. When you think of this community, it's just not the numbers, citizen. It's just not the numbers. Your neighbor, your child, your grandchild, your relative, all of these factors, all of these individuals come into play when it comes to putting our community at risk. And so we as a community, as the mayor has eloquently presented, we feel that it is time, not time, for us to basically let our guards down. We should continue to stay the course. This thing will pass. We realize that economic impact is tremendous, not only for this community, but for the state and worldwide for that matter. However, We feel that if you prioritize life versus economics, then that's an easy decision for most people. And for the city of Hinesville, Liberty County as a whole, we feel that if we continue to do what we've been doing, citizens, we will overcome this. We will get through this. And we're asking everyone to continue to shelter in place. That has not changed. And so city of Hinesville, we will enforce that accordingly. We will basically engage those who are gathering and having cookouts and what have you, because we don't want to unnecessarily put folks at risk. And when you embark upon those type of activities, that's exactly what you're doing. And so we're going to ask that you help us protect you by staying in and going out, as the mayor said, when only necessary. Those things that are essential for your well-being, for your edification in terms of providing services as it relates to your family, food, shelter. Those are the things that you have to do as a whole. But for the most part, we feel that you can minimize even going out. Minimize your travel to and from places like Lowe's. Every now and then we look at Lowe's parking lot. We go out. Citizens, please, let's not get callous. There are a lot of shopping, and we understand that you're at home, and there's not a whole lot that you can do at the house, so we go out and we purchase a lot of things, and we come back, we have projects at home and what have you. For the most part, that's good. But when you go out, please practice social distancing, because that is so vitally important for us in this fight against this virus. And finally, we've had a lot of discussions about those businesses that were basically listed in the governor's most recent order. And those are the barbershops and the hair salon and those type of businesses. Again, business owners, you are a member of this community, and you have employees. These employees are members of this community. You have clients. In most cases, those clients are a member of this community. And so when you take that in consideration, please let's not put these individuals at risk, because as the mayor stated, there is a minimum requirement of 6 feet that is recommended that you stay so far as social distancing is concerned. And when you take in consideration those businesses that realistically it's not possible to achieve that, then you're putting these individuals potentially at risk. And so we are asking you to please let us stay the course as best we can right now and continue to do what we're doing. We'll open up those businesses that we feel that can be open and safeguard the public at the same time. I know that there was one question that we received in terms of Bryant Commons. We had some discussions earlier with the county in terms of how we go about opening up our recreational facilities. We'll be collaborating with Mr. Brown and his staff as to how best to do that. We don't want to do something in isolation where it creates a hardship on one of the governmental entities versus the other. And so we're looking at this, we're taking a methodical approach in how we are going to open up our facilities, but we don't want to do that where we're putting our citizens at risk. And so once again, please be careful, realizing that those numbers are numbers, but then when it comes to our community, those numbers are individuals. And so we are trying to protect our citizens. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Kenny. I'm Joey Brown, the county administrator. I'm just going to take just a second and address administration side on the county. Just as Kenny noted, we're still in the pandemic. There is some questions whether that peak has been reached in the South Georgia area. I will tell you that county facilities are still closed to traffic at this point. Services are still available. Just as a reminder, those numbers are posted on the buildings, and in most of our buildings there is still someone present at the front to give you some guidance. The sheriff's office continues to enforce violations of gatherings and social distancing requirements. There have been a few of those that they've had to attend, and while it's not their desire to ticket or cite anybody for violations, repeated occurrences could be subject to the state law on that. There are certain parts of the parks that do remain open. James Brown Park, perfect example of that, where recreational walking is encouraged. However, gatherings are not allowed at those parks, and we have had a few gatherings at those parks that have had to be broken up. So I would remind folks that it is okay to go there and walk, practice social distancing, but not to gather under the pavilion or gather around cars that are parked there to get that out. I do want to mention that the governor's order, while it did address certain things, in one of those particularly gyms, I think it's important to note that the governor unfortunately does not control recreational venues as owned by public entities, i.e. counties and or cities. Our gyms will remain closed. That is the desire and the belief of our local officials at this point. There have been some questions I know that we have fielded related to, well, everything must be okay. How soon can we get back to recreational events and youth activities, and are the pools going to open over the summer? Would simply just echo what the chairman said earlier. At this point, we are staying the course for a little while longer. We have started to look into a time when maybe those opportunities may be opened again and how that might be staged for reopening. Would point out that there are some national protocols in place for reopening those type of activities, certain things that are recommended for counties and or cities to do as a step back into those type of events. So we are still pretty much staying in the same status that we were in. I want to stop for a second and address a few questions that have come in. And they are particular to the governor's, some of the governor's orders and some clarification there. So while these aren't the legal side of things, I would encourage businesses and or folks to contact the state if they have specific questions related to their business and what they must do to be in compliance. One of those deals with face mask or face mask required by business owners in these things that were open. The order doesn't specifically say face mask, but in those 21 directives that the mayor mentioned, one of those does say protective equipment in certain aspects of the business. So that would lead one to believe that protective equipment does include gloves, antiseptic, and face masks. So again, just a take on that, but again, I would not say that the face mask is carved in stone. Had another question about what about churches and folks still attending church? Again, I think both the chairman and mayor referenced churches. The governor's order does not say that you cannot meet in church. It did not ever say that, but it says you must be able to practice social distancing requirement. Churches are encouraged, though, to find alternate means to continue their attendance at this time to do that. Another question, what about the order? Does it address daycares? No, it does not. His most recent order did not say anything about daycares, and they're reopening at this point. I think Mr. Howard answered one about Bryant Commons there that came across. Question about thermometers and sanitization equipment available for business people, and I would simply have to really just direct you to your normal commercial site. The county and city both have needs for those. We're having to go to various avenues to try to find them because they are in high demand. So again, I don't know of any special site that you can go to for business owners to do that. Question about will anyone check the businesses prior to them opening to make sure they're compliant? You know, one of the most difficult things that I saw in that order, and even as it was stepped in to it, was the ability to police these things. You know, I would encourage probably those folks that visit these businesses to be cautious if they choose to visit these businesses, to use common sense and knowing what those items are they're supposed to be doing, question that business if they don't have them in place. Would there be authorities that could be called to come in and check them? Absolutely. Are there enough authorities to go around ahead of time and check every business countywide for compliance? Probably not. So I would just lean on the public to help your governments with that, using some common sense in saying that. Again, I guess just from a personal note, the governor did decide to issue his order. Things are not the same, in my opinion, all over the state, and probably a regional approach would have been good. We will deal with locally with what we have to deal with, and I think that the decisions that will be made here by the governing officials will be prudent and will be cautious and will take the public's best interest in mind in making those decisions. So unless we've had any other questions, guys that have come in. I did have let's see, here's a couple of others. Are you encouraging salons to stay closed? I mean, I guess that would be an opinion. At this point, we're encouraging folks to stay at home as much as possible, only for essential services. So, yeah, I think we would encourage you to be rather safe than sorry. I think Kenny said earlier, I do support these businesses trying to open back up. That it is a terrible, terrible, terrible hardship on everybody. I realize that, but I would say just be prudent in your thinking at that point. What is Fort Stewart doing? We have an update actually with Fort Stewart scheduled tomorrow. I will just share bits and pieces of that. They have pretty much limited movement on and off post for their military folks and for retirees and for personnel that want to visit the post. I mean, basically they have shut down any recreational opportunities on post other than hunting and fishing that occurs really not in the cantonment area. They've made it very clear with questionable aspects that those folks in the military are to limit their travel. They did do an analysis about a week ago of travelability in the Easter weekend, and it was very disturbing to them that order was not being followed. So they have taken that very seriously, and again are encouraging local law enforcement officials who may come across a gathering of illegal nature to let their public safety know, so that they could get involved with those military personnel that local law enforcement has. I did have another question. Thank you, Ms. Merle O'Neill. I'll mention your name on this, about what's the difference between a stay-at-home order and a national health emergency. So the national health emergency, as declared, is an emergency need for health care service to respond to a disaster, significant outbreak of an infectious disease, bioterrorist attack, or a catastrophic event. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trying to talk too fast there. And it's basically done to open up the federal system for health care to provide some funding there. The stay-at-home order obviously says stay at home except for essential need and services. So again, one is from the federal level, opening up some avenues for funding and recognizing a significant event, and then the other, a governor's order obviously that says here's what we think you ought to do. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to yield back to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, Mayor Brown, Mr. Howard, for your continuous diligence and as we address the citizens of the necessities to abide by what CDC recommends, and thank you to the general public. If I may close on a personal note, just to perhaps enhance or not enhance to inform that this is very real. On this past week, 2 of my cousins lost their husbands to the coronavirus. So it's not a myth, it is real. It is real, it's real. So let's not become complacent or lose our efforts to perhaps contain this as much as we can. We'll be back next week to update you further. In the meantime, please visit our respective websites for any further information that you might need. Thank you. Have a great day.